Welcome to Joy in Our Town. I'm your host, Dave Wiedis, and today we have a special guest, Amanda Charney, who is the Executive Director of Small Steps in Speech.
Yes, that's correct.
Right? Mm-hmm. And you are also a speech pathologist.
Correct.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about speech pathology. What is a speech-language pathologist?
A speech-language pathologist is someone who works with individuals, whether they're children, pediatrics, geriatrics. They work with individuals who have a communication impairment. We do an assessment to determine whether they qualify for speech therapy, and then we come up with a diagnosis, which is followed by treatment to either the individual in addition to family members so that they can carry on that treatment outside of the therapy environment.
So it sounds like you do a lot of important work with both older people as well as kids.
Yes, absolutely.
So talk to me a little bit about communication disorders.
Communication disorders is a very widespread disorder. When you think of communication disorders, some people might only think that it might be an articulation-only type of delay, where someone might not be able to say their R sound, but it goes so much more on a broader spectrum than that. Communication disorders can impact someone's overall intelligibility, which is, that articulation or speech motor production. But it could also go into swallowing disorders, hearing problems. It can go into the many aspects of language, such as language acquisition, language content, language function, and language use as well.
Slow down a little bit, because that's a lot to take in.
It is.
Language acquisition? What's that?
It goes with the semantics, the syntax of language, the grammar of language. You also have the use of language, how individuals interact with each other. The social pragmatic piece is also the part of language. So language goes under a very broad umbrella where people might have disorders on that whole different spectrums of, language.
Okay. So you said you do assessments. If I were to come to you for an assessment, what would that look like? What would you do with me?
A lot of them have protocols, so depending on what your signs and symptoms would be, we would be able to pick whatever type of assessment would best fit whatever delay or disability that you're suspecting that you might be able to have. So someone who comes in with an articulation delay would go for a language assessment, and then we'll come up with a standard score to see where you range compared to peers your age.
What's an articulation delay?
That might be somebody who might substitute a W for an R, or someone who might have a lisp, or some kind of a speech motor production where their overall intelligibility of speech is delayed.
Okay. And what typically causes that kind of problem?
There's so many different reasons why that could happen. It could happen, at birth. It could happen due to a traumatic brain injury, some type of damage to the brain. So it all depends on, the child or the individual that would come in.
Right. So you do an assessment, and then you come up with a protocol or a therapy.
A treatment.
Treatment plan for the person.
So we do the assessment, and then you come up with the diagnosis after the assessment, and then you would come up with a treatment plan for that particular individual.
Okay. And so what kind of therapies are available? I know that's a broad question because there's so many different kinds of problems. So pick some of the common kind of problems that you might see in children today.
Okay.
And then what kind of therapies would be?
Something that's very common with children today that I see is something that's called apraxia of speech. And that's for individuals who the brain knows what they want to say, but they just have difficulty producing intelligible speech. So that actually gets the individual very frustrated, because since they know what they want to say, it's just not able to produce intelligible due to the articulators, which are very weak with the oral musculature. So that would be working on the individual sounds for the child, and then really working on different muscles to produce intelligible speech. But the big key to speech therapy is, carry over once you leave speech therapy, is that we give the child and the family the strategies, and then it's really up to the child and the family members to really carry over those strategies outside of speech therapy.
Right. A common abnormality that we see is stuttering, right?
Yes. And that's considered a fluency disorder. So, and that's a very difficult thing for someone who has a fluency or a stuttering disorder, because they just can't control a lot of that. So, and the great movie, The King's Speech was such a wonderful movie that really brought that disorder to a lot of the public as well. And it's really just strategies on how to control your fluency, how to work on respiration and phonation for that person.
So it sounds like when you diagnose something like stuttering, and then you give exercises, right? It sounds like there's a lot of responsibility of both the patient as well as the family to practice.
There is a lot.
Yeah, it's almost like physical therapy.
And that's exactly what, us as speech therapists really want other people to understand is, we can do so much. It's really up to the individual to take ownership of their disability or their delay and really practice outside of what we can give them. We like to give homework, whether you're, an adult or a child, we still give you homework to really make sure that you're carrying over all of our strategies to make sure that you have intelligible speech or fluent speech or appropriate language, whether it be social skills or the different other areas.
Right. So what advice would you give to family members when you have a child who is, having problems with, various aspects of communication?
The best thing that you can do is, understand where the child is coming from. You don't want to put too much pressure on the child because that could lead to frustration. And then sometimes down the line, that can lead to a child who just really doesn't even want to speak anymore because they're constantly being pressured to overcorrect themselves. So it's just, overcorrection, as the parent could say, if a child substituted a W for an R, such as saying, the call, the parent might be able to say, oh, you want to go drive in the car. So if they just overemphasize, and the child could listen to that and then try to use those strategies as well. And then the speech therapist usually always gives parents strategies. So, sometimes you can even target some of those areas in the car while the children are taking a bath or before they go to bed. Those are there's always times to work on language.
So you're saying there's these teachable moments, but at the same time you really don't want to overpressure a child.
Yes, because it could lead to frustration.
Yeah. I'm intrigued by your organization. Tell us the name of your organization. And go ahead.
The organization, is something that's very near and dear to me. It is called Small Steps in Speech, and we had our 3rd anniversary in February on when this organization was created.
Okay, so tell us about the creation of the organization and how it got its name as well.
Small Steps in Speech got its name from a local soldier who was born and raised in Pennsylvania. His name was Mark Small, and he was a staff sergeant. He worked hard. He enlisted for 5 years with the United States Army. He worked his way up to earning the Green Beret, and he was a Special Forces medic for the United States Army. He was my fiance. We had, plans for our future, and I said goodbye to him in January of 2009, and he was only there for 3 short weeks in Afghanistan, and unfortunately he never made it home. So the organization Small Steps in Speech is really a tale from his last name. When we were talking about, our future together and the children that we were, planning on having, he actually came up with the name Small Steps in Speech for something that he wanted me to start my own private practice for. Once I had children, I could work in the home, and I would be able to care for my own children. So that's where he came up with the name Small Steps in Speech, to symbolize my last name and also to symbolize the steps that a child with a disability has to take to be a better communicator. So when I heard of the news of Mark's passing, I just immediately thought, what better way to honor him and to remember him than to start a nonprofit. And I thought it was just going to be something small, locally, where we would be able to help out children in the Delaware Valley. And little did I know that we're getting applications throughout the whole country of Colorado and Ohio, and it's just soaring beyond anything that I ever expected.
Let's talk about that. So what does Small Steps in Speech do? It's a foundation.
It is a foundation. It's a 501(c)(3) nonprofit organization. So if you go to our website, which is smallstepsinspeech.org, you will really be able to find out the background and the history of our organization, and then you'll also be able to find out how you can apply. It could be a parent applying. It could be therapists applying for a grant. It does go for children from birth up until their 21st birthday, and it works with a third-party provider.
It sounds like you're busy doing great work.
Yes.
Great work. We just have a few more seconds. Just anything else you want to communicate to parents and caregivers of children who have speech problems?
Just that there's help out there, and anyone who comes into any type of interaction with a child who has any type of speech and language disability, just by talking to the child, reading books to the children, and just having, you know, conversations and even just silly play with a child is you can become your own speech therapist, even at home, just by, you know, your own interactions with a child.
Yeah, because most of us might feel awkward doing that, right? But you're saying that's really helpful.
It is. It's so helpful. Just the human interaction with a child, and just trying to, you know, read them books. And there's so many different types of programs for computers out there now for children, which you know is great as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your work, and thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us on Joy in Our Town. I'm your host, Dave Wiedis, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.